The moon is out. Oh, it's so pretty. So hi, my name is Paola. I'm a book person. I talk about books on this channel quite a lot because I'm kind of obsessed. This video is the second video in me delving into the Legend of Drizzt saga. So I've just read book 2 and 3, so they are Exile and Sojourn. So I've already made a video about the first book, Homeland. Drizzt is a dark elf who was born and raised in the underground city of Menzoberranzan. This is part of the D&D extended universe, by the way. And in Menzoberranzan, everyone is taught that the way of the world is to be a backstabber, essentially. If you want to get somewhere, you need to kill the person who is sitting next to you in case they do better than you. Like, it goes places. But Drizzt doesn't really fall into this mentality. He's like, no, I want to be nice to people. He's also really good at fighting. So book 1 happens, and at the end he leaves the city, followed by his faithful Black Panther, whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. I'm just going to call her, him. Is it she or he? I'm going to go with Gwen. Book 2, Exile, takes place 10 years after book 1. Drizzt has been living in the Underdark on his own with Gwen. He's found himself a little nook where he can live alongside a bunch of mushroom people. And in this time of loneliness and isolation, he has pretty much sunken into what I would describe as a sort of primal state of mind, which he calls the hunter. And this side of his personality, I guess, is only bent on survival and killing whatever foe he comes across before he gets killed. The book starts with him in full hunter mode, fighting this giant monster that's made its way onto his territory. So it would appear that part of the Menzoberranzan, I guess, mindless killing mentality has survived in his mind, but in this scenario it's used more as a necessary function in order to survive. This doesn't sit well with Drizzt, however, because it's not the reason. Like, he didn't leave Menzoberranzan in order to live this way. So he sets off to try and find something new. He comes across a bunch of gnomes and decides to follow them back to their city. Meanwhile, back in Menzoberranzan, Drizzt's mum, who tried to kill him at birth as a sacrifice to the Spider Queen, because that's how nice the Dark Elves are in Menzoberranzan. They will give up their own newborn babies to their deity because that's what they're about. Getting the favour of the Spider Queen. She is still intent on ridding the world of her son, because after killing Drizzt's father, she was like, you have to take over from him. And Drizzt was like, no, and just walked out. And obviously this cannot live to be. So she sends first her other son after him, because I think there was a total of 3 sons, and one of them killed the other, and then Drizzt survived. Oh yeah, and the older brother was killed, and that's why Drizzt survived, because one of the brothers was given as a sacrifice of Spider Queen, even though it wasn't the right one. Politics and genealogy. And Drizzt's mum is so nice that she resurrects Drizzt's deceased dad, with whom he had a really good relationship, by the way, and decides to send his walking corpse after her son because she's so nice that way. Meanwhile, Drizzt ends up in the gnome city, where he hooks up with one of the characters from book 1, a gnome that he saved but whose brother chopped off his hands. So this gnome has, like, one of his hands is a hammer, and I think the other one's a pickaxe, because they're miners. And it's, like, really cool, but there's a scene where they're eating, and how does he eat with a hammer and a pickaxe? I have questions. At least in Norsemen, they thought of this when it came to Varg's hands. Like, he wasn't too pleased about it, but it seemed like the most obvious solution. But anyway, Drizzt hits it off with the gnomes, specifically some of the younger ones, by telling them stories of his great adventures killing monsters. However, this sets off the darker side of his personality, the hunter, which seems to be some kind of trauma response or PTSD, because he kind of clicks into it whenever he has a dark memory of these monsters or reliving these traumatic events where he had to resolve to mindless killing in order to survive. Yeah, he doesn't have the best possible life. Once the gnomes discover that he is being targeted by his own mother, he has to leave the city. Friend the gnome decides to go with him, and they have a bunch of adventures in the Underdark where they meet crazy creatures on acid lakes, and there's a bunch of fighting going on, and then they meet another character called Clacker, and a wizard, and a moving tower, and a giant brain that controls everything, and dimension swapping, and it goes completely crazy. And fighting his zombified dad. This book is like 300 pages long. Like, I really want to hand it to Bob Salvatore for cramming this much stuff into such a short novel. It's so much fun. It's so much adventure and cool stuff and creatures and wonderful. It gives us a side of fantasy that you don't normally get, because as I understand it, when R.A. Salvatore started writing these novels, like, there is a whole world for D&D, like with a map and races and, you know, geography and everything, and pretty much everywhere on the map was taken, so he was like resorted to going underground and exploring everything you can in an underground world with mushroom people. The mushroom people get killed though. That really made me sad. I like the mushroom people. But Drizzt's ultimate goal is to walk out into the light. In the first book, he did visit the surface with a group of his comrades, where they had to go and slaughter a bunch of daylight-dwelling elves for no obvious reason that he could fathom, and he felt something extraordinary when he was at the surface and saw the sunrise, even though this is a place where he doesn't belong. Like, the Dark Elves are evolved to live underground, but he's like, no, I'm gonna go to the surface. And he has to go alone because his friends can no longer follow him. This book is, apart from being a great adventure, it is a beautiful exploration of what friendship is and what friendship means, and especially opposing that to the sellswords in Menzoberranzan and the families who have no affection or love for each other. They are just about politics. They are just about cruelty and evil and getting what is best for them and pleasing the Spider Queen, as opposed to Drizzt, who finds two companions who on appearance have nothing in common with him, but with whom he can form a relationship, a meaningful relationship, and find companionship and friendship through the darkest possible place there is. So, wonderful, brilliant adventure with a bunch of different creatures and situations, and a beautiful story of friendship between four characters. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. So that was Exile. The third book in the series is Sojourn, which concludes the first trilogy in the Legend of Drizzt insane series, which is 35 books long now? Like, how long is it now? Like, it's just insane. Bob Salvatore never stops. I can't say, this is a word that I find really hard, to say in English. Séjour in French. Sojourn. The book starts with Drizzt sitting at the top of the mountain. He has finally found an exit from the Underdark and has emerged into the world above of light and snow, and he has to sit on a rock for, I guess, an adaptation period to allow himself to just get used to being at the surface. The first part of this book is him starting to make sense of his surroundings. He hooks up with a group of trolls, and he's like, great, I've made some new friends, but then they go and attack a human farm, and he's like, what did these humans do to you? So Drizzt comes to the conclusion that these creatures are evil and shows them how good he is with sharp and pointy things. Drizzt spends a lot of time observing the farm and its inhabitants, a cute little family with a bunch of kids. At one point the kids venture up into the mountains and one of them catches a glimpse of Drizzt and they're like, okay, there's a dark elf up there. So they tell everyone in the village and they go and hunt Drizzt. One of the hunters has 2 dogs and his dog attacks Drizzt, which leads him to kill the dog, and this man's like, okay, I am going to spend the rest of my life hunting you down in order to kill you. And he essentially does. So there's the fight with the demon creature, and then Drizzt has to move away because the hunter is after him. He also has to deal with the fact that his magic doesn't really work that well on the surface. He can't, like, levitate or do any of the things that he could do in the Underdark. He begins to travel again and then comes across this thing called Winter. A group of surface elves take pity on him, teach him how to use a fire. He then hooks up with a blind ranger who essentially teaches him how to live above ground. And then there's an insane battle between them and like 1,000,000 orcs. And they win, because they're that good. Drizzt has essentially found his alter ego in human form. After this, he has to move on again. There's a big time lapse, like a bunch of years go by where he essentially travels from one place to another, never being accepted wherever he goes because he is a dark elf. The only people who will accept him are a bunch of really weird monks who seem to think that suffering is the answer to everything. You know, like those medieval movies where there was always someone whipping themselves? That's what they are. They're like the pilgrims to the Shrike Temple in Hyperion. They worship the Lord of Pain. Between running away from the hunter and a rather weird forest evil sprite thing, they end up in the lair of a dragon, and there's like a Hobbit style Smaug encounter, which I just found really annoying. So Drizzt is like, yeah, you're amazing, you're wonderful, I want to see you roar. Like, I'm here to see the crab who became a legend. I'm so shiny. And yeah, the dragon like spits fire, which was kind of disappointing. Like, if you're gonna plagiarize Tolkien, at least do it subtly. Drizzt ends up in a city where he finally does find a place to stay, on the top of a mountain surrounded by a bunch of dwarves who eventually accept him because he saves one of their daughters. This book wasn't as interesting, I found, as the other two. It was definitely the one I enjoyed the less of the 3. Despite that, I did find it super fun to read, like especially the battle with the orcs, with all Drizzt and the ranger setting up all of these traps. I also really liked the fact that the ranger was blind, that he had to learn how to fight, like he can communicate with animals, and they can, like, there's an owl who kind of hoots in the direction that he has to shoot at, so he knows where to fire his bow and arrow. He has all these really cool ways of getting around his blindness. But unlike Exile, which did, as I said, was an exploration of friendship through a shared struggle, Sojourn felt more like a succession of events that do sort of follow a different logic. Like, you have the evil sprite who at the beginning works for the demon lord and then hooks up with the hunter, and I don't really understand why this creature doesn't try and hook up with Drizzt at any points, because Drizzt is essentially the better, like, he's the one who killed your previous master. It would make sense for you to be around him. Like, this creature wants to be around the most powerful entity, but I guess he evil, so he go with Migrisel the hunter. And yeah, Smaug also, like, I was also interested to hear about the dragons, because it is explained that there are several kinds of dragons that have several, like, different things going on, apparently. I'm guessing this will come up in further novels. We shall see. This novel also kind of ends in a weird place. Like, as I said, it's supposed to be the conclusion to the first trilogy, but also like it really feels like it's kind of ended in the middle of something. I've just managed to get my hands on the Crystal Shard, which is book 4 in the Drizzt series, and the first book. I think the next cycle is 5 books long. So yeah, I need to get hold of all of them, but I have got the Crystal Shard. I will be reading that at some point. I have the Anne McCaffrey novels to do first, plus a bunch of other stuff. But basically, I am still super enjoying this series, and I super want to read the rest of it. All 34, 5, however many novels there are now. So that's it from me for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.